Welcome back to the Chris Buskirk Show. I am joined today by Malcolm Shayuna, who is a writer, and I am informed today that he is also a non-denominational populist living in Sweden, as well as Angela Nagle. She's the author of the book Kill All Normies, as well as a number of interesting essays in places like American Affairs, Unheard, and Angela, as we were just saying, you started off writing for Jacobin, but it's probably unlikely that we'll see your byline there anytime soon,
Yeah.
which is sort of it's actually that's a kind of a good segue right into what we want to talk about. I should also add that both of you are regular collaborators on the What's Left podcast with Amy Therese and with Oliver Bateman. But Malcolm, both you and Angela sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sort of grew up on the political left, but then were kicked out. Maybe I don't know if you left them or they left you, but there was a split that occurred. Angela, you started writing at Jacobin, but that maybe it's useful to sort of frame this conversation, which is picking up where Malcolm and I left off a month or two ago about it's almost like the title of your other podcast, What's Left, but how does the left identify itself? How does it think about itself? What is it doing? And then there came a point, I guess, Angela, where what the Jacobin left was doing and what you were doing parted company. Maybe explain what happened there, just as a way of framing our bigger picture discussion.
Well, I think the official parting company was an American Affairs piece called The Left Case Against Open Borders, which I kind of took a gamble on in the hope that some people would see the sense in what I was saying, and that some people hadn't gone, for me, just beyond a point where I could possibly, agree with them, or hadn't gone fully kind of anarchist, which is a trend that I saw kind of throughout the Bernie years, we'll say. But it was clear from the reaction, which was 100% negative, that this was now something you had to believe. So you basically couldn't believe in it, the nation state having any legitimacy whatsoever anymore. And so, yeah, that kind of that move towards anarchist had really fully taken place by then, and that the very extreme response to the piece sort of made that just impossible to ignore. And it was also the moment where I realized that any hopes that I had had for the Bernie project, which did have signs of hope at the beginning, in my opinion, were over. I mean, at that point, I had to say, this thing has been completely, at this point, taken over by Malcolm and I have talked about it elsewhere, this kind of the youth wing of the kind of like professional class who are these overproduced elite aspirants, and that a lot of their kind of crazy ideology comes from their class role, basically. And so, yeah, but it's important to remember, like, there's an awful lot of people from a kind of Peter Hitchens to like the neocons or whatever who did this right-left or left-right move throughout their life. But, back in just a few years ago, like around 2016, 2017, a magazine like Jacobin was actually, I felt very much at home there, because they started out kind of publishing things that were actually quite critical of progressive neoliberalism or something like that. So I kind of I really felt at home there because of that critique. I often use as an example, they started off with an interview with Walter Ben Michaels, who wrote The Trouble with Diversity. So it really is a case of everyone else changed and I didn't,
You have, I guess it would have been, what was that, 2017, where you sort of parted brass rags with the left, or
No,
the
it was 2018, kind of
okay,
late in 2018. So I held on like beyond a point where I knew the whole thing was getting quite ridiculous. But because I kind of had always had this problem with the left. Like I always felt that a lot of its economic projects were absolutely necessary, and I still do. But I simply couldn't accept um, much of its cultural projects. And yeah, and I did think that 2016 kind of opened up the possibility for a realignment that would be something closer to what I had always wanted it to be. But then it just went wildly off in the wrong direction, and it became this the cultural politics kind of came to dominate to a point where you know I had to think like this is just so profoundly socially destructive and antisocial and almost like anti civilizational at a certain point. But also, I mean, one thing that's sorry, this is a bit of a long answer, but one thing that has always kind of been a problem for me with the thing that we call the left is that you can kind of broadly define it as a it always has some kind of egalitarian economic project and either a liberationist cultural project or one that you might say is trying to um, liberate people from the shackles of tradition in some way. So that would be true of even the Soviet Union, which is obviously you couldn't describe as libertarian or something culturally libertarian like you can the post-Cold War American left, but they all kind of have those two things in common. I think that's like the common thread. But in fact, those two things don't have any necessary connection whatsoever, really. There's no reason why a person has to have libertarian or liberationist cultural politics to believe in economic justice or equality.